Alan, I've been spending a lot of time with naked men.
Play the theme music. Hello and welcome to this episode of Tripology. I'm Alan and I'm here with the ever-peeping Adam.
Be careful, mate. Always have one eye on me. You never know. Look over your shoulder. I might be taking a sneaky peek.
Are you a peeper?
No, I don't think I am a peeper. But I've been in situations very recently in South Korea where I've just seen some things. I've been around some things, and sometimes it's difficult not to look.
Not to have a peep?
Yeah, well, is it a peep?
No,
No, hang on, here we go. Is it a peep if it's on show?
No, I think peeping implies some sort of disguise or once I was working at a supermarket, right?
Here we go.
And there was a series of crimes going on in the supermarket that they wanted to get to the bottom of.
Okay.
So they hired a private investigative team to see if they could catch the people stealing the cabbages in action.
Outsourced them. They weren't employees of the supermarket.
You've got it. They went to a private detective firm, hired them in, and they said they put us all together for a staff meeting the morning and said, look, guys, there's going to be some private investigators in the supermarket this morning. You don't need to do anything different. You won't know who they are.
Yeah.
Just go about your job as normal and they'll be doing their job, you know?
Yeah. Would it not have been better not to tell you? Or do they have to by law?
It was big news in the supermarket that this was going to be going on. So they just wanted to address it off the top.
Okay.
I was restocking the cheese aisle.
Right. Is that a euphemism?
Yeah. I looked to my right and I saw a man and a woman with black leather jackets on, sunglasses, and one of them was pushing the trolley, the other was reading a newspaper and looking over the top. It was absolutely absurd.
That's so funny. What a cliche.
Yeah.
As if the person they're going to catch is actually an alien from Men in Black.
It was one step beyond, like, if they'd cut the eyes out of, like, Gordon Brown's face or something and were looking out from beyond it. It was amazing.
That's so funny. Well, I wasn't wearing a disguise.
Okay.
And, we'll go on to talk about that sort of stuff. Because I think, maybe I'll just go in and say it now very briefly, just so you have some context, guys. Part of East Asian culture is to go to public bathhouses.
Right.
And it's certainly something that I would recommend people do. Usually they're quite old establishments. I mean, I went to some outdated ones. But maybe a separation of men and women often. And then you go to, the sauna or the bath, what might be sort of similar to a jacuzzi, and just relax and just have a great time. And you can be there for hours or, an hour, or sometimes people even sleep there overnight. So really important part of South Korean culture, I think, and definitely something that you should do in South Korea.
They sleep in the bath?
Not in the bath, but in the building that the bath is in.
Okay.
So they're like huge, sometimes multi-story buildings, and sometimes there are areas where you can just relax and have massages or...
Yeah, falling asleep in the bath sounds quite dangerous.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd recommend that. But... it's a really interesting way to spend your time, especially in somewhere like South Korea, and when it was cold, as it was when I was there. But I don't think it's the top of everyone's list, because if you're only in a city for like 3 or 4 days, maybe you want to do some more sort of, I don't know, touristic, outdoorsy type stuff. But I mean, it was where I had the most fun.
It's of a niche, isn't it, going to the bath? Now, there are some amazing baths in the world. I remember, when I was traveling around Budapest and Hungary, you got the Széchenyi baths there. It's like really a huge, that's like the big tourist thing to do. One of them in Budapest is to go to the Széchenyi baths.
Yeah.
When I was in Georgia, my friend was having a birthday and her first impulse was, let's all go to the bath.
Cool.
It ended up not happening because people didn't want to.
Yeah, well, maybe we can talk about that, because it doesn't necessarily form part of our culture and tradition, does it?
Not at all. In fact, people turn their nose up at the idea of a public bath like that. Why do that when you can go and have what we call spas, are like private little bath experiences, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, would you think that's something to do with embarrassment, maybe?
I think we're living in an era of shame where no one feels adequate enough. And in order to sell more products, companies like L'Oreal and Unilever make us all feel negative about ourselves, so we buy more stuff. And that culture does not go hand in hand with the baths. So in many ways, L'Oreal, Unilever, all those people, they're stealing money from the public bathhouses.
That's maybe a conversation for a different day.
Okay.
We weren't going to try and angle for sponsorships with any of those companies. You just mentioned one.
No. I've already fallen out with Unilever over some other issues.
But if there are any bathhouses
Yeah.
that want to work with us, I mean, I'll endorse that for sure. We'll even do a calendar, won't we?
Yeah, we're much more, in Tropology, we're much more about little small baths than we are about big pharma.
Well, let me just talk about one in particular, if I may. So, in Seoul in particular, and also in South Korea in general, there are lots of public bathhouses that you can go and visit. They're usually very cheap.
Okay.
Sort of cost about £8.
Wow.
16,000 won.
Cheaper than a bottle of shampoo.
Yeah. Is it nowadays?
About.
Who knows? But yeah, very cheap. And how long you stay there doesn't dictate how much you pay. I mean, you still pay 16,000 won and you can be there for 1 hour or all night and sleep there, as I said.
Really? You can stay the night?
Yeah, and then depending on what you do there, if you just want to use the sauna, then that's a price. If you just want to use the public bath, that's a price. Or if you want an all-encompassing sauna, spa, and all the bells and whistles experience, that might be a different price. And then on top of that, you can also get massages as well of different kinds. So, yeah, lovely thing to do. There was one in particular I really enjoyed going to. I went to 3 different ones in Seoul. Just get an idea, get a global overview of what they were like. And I mean, you can tell I'm obviously a fan, but it was called Supsok Hanbang Bathhouse.
Now,
are we going to address my pronunciation? Or?
Yeah. Well, a lot of our fans are interested in maybe receiving a Supsok Hanbang.
that isn't one of the services. That's not the name of one of the massages that you can receive.
Hi, I've come here for the Supsok Hanbang. Is that something that you offer? We stopped doing that in the 80s. Now we're a bath.
yeah. But it's that's the one I would recommend going to. That's the one where I had the most fun, if you can call it that.
Was it the best hangbang you've ever received?
I'm able to have a better one on my own. However, this one, I don't know if we can say that.
You can always say whatever you like.
I just couldn't resist. But to make the joke, not the and I liked it because it was kind of outdated. It seemed like it needed updating. It seemed a little bit more traditional and authentic. It's in the northwest of the city, next to Ansan Mountain, which is also somewhere I'd recommend you go. Really nice area, walking around there, a couple of hikes to do, inner city hikes. But you walk in, pay your money, and then you get given some kind of, they're like pajamas, really.
Yeah.
That you change into.
With a hole cut out of the front.
And the back.
They're like pajamas.
If pajamas had a massive hole in the front.
Yeah.
No, so you change into those, and then, I mean, for the most part, mate, you enter this bathhouse area changing room, if you like, and everyone's just walking around naked.
They're not.
They are. And it's liberating.
Naked, but for a pair of pajamas.
No, they're all naked.
So what's the pajamas for?
If you want to go into the furnace room, the sauna area.
Well, I'm sorry, but it's a bit late for that.
Well, no, when you go into the bath, like the jacuzzi and the hot pool, then you're naked.
Okay.
But people stay naked and they just walk around the other rooms, but not when men and women meet. If there's a communal area or the corridors, that's when you put your PJs on.
Okay.
And if you go into the sauna, because they're men and women, you would also put your PJs on. But if you're in the steam room or any of the pools, then you're separated in terms of your sex, your gender, but you are fully naked.
Okay, now, we're making a lot of jokes because you said the word hangbang.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming there's not a sexual component to it. It's actually just a lovely, clean, getting scrubbed up experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's so relaxing. And I didn't know whether I was going to mention this, but I was kind of going through a breakup at the time. Right. So I needed to just take myself away, spend a few hours looking at naked men. No, distract myself. And it was just a great way to relax and to, think about things or not think about things, really. But yeah, I would just highly recommend it. I did try, and I'm surprised it's taken me this long to mention this group. But when I was in Seoul, I didn't mention the name of the hostel, obviously, but I did have back-to-back nights of what was the worst dorm experience of my life. In 10 years of travel, that was a little Patreon section, wasn't it? You might remember that. But in that same hostel, there was a little crew of us that used to knock around together. We spent about a week together in the hostel. My mate Moses, that I showed you a video of last night, reel coming out soon. He's from London, 27-year-old, super intelligent guy, lots of fun. Very, very good to talk to. You'd get on with him well for sure. He thinks about travel in a very different way, analyzes, great, talk about emotions, very emotionally intelligent. And then there's
Is it different enough that it's not travel at all? Like, oh, you're not thinking of travel. He's like, when I think of travel, I think of sort of a piece of grass or a leaf. And like, no, you're not thinking of travel.
No.
You're thinking of biology.
No, it's not that abstract.
Yeah.
And then there was my good mate Bob as well. So really interesting. Bob was born in Korea to a Korean family and then adopted by a Dutch family.
Oh, wow.
And grew up in the Netherlands and spent about 10 years over in Brussels as well. Okay. 50 years old. And I mean, what he hasn't done isn't worth doing. He's an amazing person to travel with, to talk to. And then, of course, we got Sasha, who I ended up traveling Japan with. German 42-year-old who's a kindergarten teacher.
Okay.
And the four of us were knocking around. We were a crew, mate. It was so good. And we would eat together. We would go and see, the palaces of Seoul and go around walking streets and markets and stuff. However, the moment I mentioned going to a public bathhouse, I was on my own.
Okay, it was a bit of a taboo. So you've made some really good friends. You're post-breakup. You're feeling a certain kind of way.
Yeah.
And you've made some good friends, but they're not going to accompany you to the baths because they think what?
Well, I don't really know.
Okay.
I was encouraging them to do that. And I was saying, guys, I know that I went to one yesterday, but I'm just saying I really like it. And I would encourage you to do the same. Do you want to join me? And maybe, I've overanalyzed this and maybe overthought it, but maybe our relationship had already got to a certain level where then it would have been quite awkward to see each other naked. Right. I would have been fine. But do you think we would go to one together?
I think it'd be fine.
It would be fine.
Yeah.
Would you go to one on your own?
Yeah, but maybe I would get less enjoyment out of it than going with friends, I think.
Really?
Yeah,
I think you might be in the minority there.
Really?
I think more people would, certainly from the West anyway. Send us an email. Go to the website, tripologypodcast.com, get on the contact form section and let us know whether you would go with your own friends. Friends from back home might be fine. Friends that you meet travelling, I think would also be fine. Of course, I've got no problem getting my kit off.
But you're not talking and stuff while you're hanging out in the baths?
With the strangers?
No, would that not be preferable to have a friend to talk to? Otherwise, you just sat there naked in silence.
Yeah, I went to one in Gangnam, which is, of course, the very sort of upmarket, very wealthy, businessy area, very commercial area of Seoul. I went to one there, and there were two mates just having a chinwag in the sort of pool when I was there. So yeah, I would imagine that would be...
That sounds more fun to me, going as a social activity or hanging out, than it does sitting with your own thoughts.
Yeah, it's quite individualistic experience. If you do go on your own, you can get all introspective and just relax in every sense. But maybe going with a friend would be good.
Are there like different pools for different things, like a cold one, a hot one?
Exactly.
Right.
You got it. So... there was an occasion. I went to one in Seoul, which I think was called Insadong actually, but the name doesn't matter because I'm not going to recommend you go there.
Okay.
I went there and I was in the pool, and then a German guy turned up with a local, and I don't know how they were friends. I was trying to work out the dynamic from the off, but he had arrived that day, and then fell upon this local, and they
fell upon them. Well, that's how they met.
With their clothes off. Yeah. No, I just thought it was interesting for me to be in a steam room with a German guy that I had just met, and then a guy that he had just met who was actually, in fact, Korean. Yeah. And the whole time we were all sitting there naked having a conversation. Like, oh, when did you arrive? It was just a very normal conversation, but we were all starkers.
It's a great leveler, isn't it?
I think that's probably the best way to describe it.
Or not. Perhaps it sets people further apart. Depends on who it is, doesn't it?
Do with that what you will.
Yeah. Are there, last question before we go off to a meditation break, is there a sub-community of travellers? Because I know in Japan, sometimes travellers go to the gaming cafes and just sleep in the chairs because it's cheaper than a night's stay.
Okay.
It sounds to me like paying amount of money and just staying overnight in the baths is cheaper than a hostel in some sense.
Yeah. That, I mean, is it a thing to do? Perhaps. Is it a thing that is done? Definitely. I didn't meet anyone who did it, but I did read articles about people doing that.
And on that fucking bombshell, let's go to a meditation break.
I hate arriving at an airport and needing to prove I have an onward ticket before boarding the plane.
Oh, it's the worst. I don't know when I'm going to leave the country. Okay, I'm a traveller.
That's why instead of buying a flight, we use a flight rental service.
Yeah, it's so convenient. You just find a flight, rent it for 48 hours, show it to the assistant, they let you on the plane.
Onwardticket.com, they're a great company. Click the link in the description. Support the podcast.
And here we are, back from the meditation break, and keen-eyed listeners watching on video media will notice that the lighting appears to have changed all mysteriously. Why is that? Well, it's because during the meditation break, I decided to adjust the camera over there. Here is that footage. Yeah, so I broke the audio terminated, and the back half of the episode, which is an absolute bacchanalian devolution into chaos, has been lost to the annals, but for a tiny little backup camera with less than desirable audio.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't in the plan, and it's a big shame to have lost that 15-20 minutes, including the Patreon section. It is important to add, but we've made a little business decision, haven't we?
Yeah, and what that decision is we never ever want to shortchange the listeners, but we love you guys so much. So we're going to record an extra 15 minutes now. We're going to talk about something else. But that crazy, wild 15 minutes, that's going to go straight up on the Patreon. So if for as little as $1 a month, you can go and hear the audio to that, or there's video for $2 a month, so on. Go to patreon.com/Tripology podcast. You can hear, I mean, what can only be described as a terrible audio, amazing bit of content.
Yeah, it's rice for breakfast, isn't it?
There's rice for breakfast. There's us talking about Korean food.
Yeah, and then we do a little game towards the end where you ask me loads of travel questions, actually, for a change. So definitely worth listening to. And yeah, it's a shame that we are now doing something different, but hopefully this will be just as good.
We're one of the only podcasts, I think, in the world that does a podcast full-fledged whilst traveling, whilst moving around. Our gear's always slightly different. It's a wonder that there's not more problems. We always want to be honest. We don't want to be like, oh, now you have to pay for it, so we're going to do extra content anyway. But, you know, I think support the Patreon community. The community over there is awesome. So get over there, patreon.com/Tripology podcast, link in the description.
Yeah, thanks ever so much for being so understanding. But in lieu of the second half of the episode...
What do you want to talk about, mate?
Well, I mentioned in the first half of the episode, if we can go back that far, that I was cycling around Taiwan sort of through a breakup, wasn't I? I went through a breakup at the time I was in Taiwan, just before that, and then I was kind of dealing with that in Taiwan and South Korea.
Yeah, and I didn't pursue it or mention it really on the show because, you know, sometimes we talk about things, but we don't know how much detail we want to go into. So I thought I'll shy back on that one, just let you carry on with the story.
Yeah.
You want to talk a bit more about it?
We can do. I mean, ironically, it's like a flip reverse, isn't it? Because in the Patreon section, often we get very, very personal and very honest. And now we're sort of flipping that on its head. And
the main show goes on Patreon and now we get really honest in the... This show now serves as an encouragement to our fans to get over to Patreon. I think it's a really cool thing that you can do for us to help us out.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm happy to talk about my breakup and give you an overview of sort of what went on without going into too much detail, of course. I'll always want to remain respectful, but I can talk about whether I would recommend doing something extraordinary like cycling around Taiwan in order to help you cope with a breakup.
Yeah, and I think what's of value is talking about breakups in relationships from a travel perspective. I know I've had breakups whilst traveling. People I've met traveling who I've fallen in love with, who I've then broken up with. I think it's like quite an important topic. I think people will resonate with it.
Yeah, it's also important to mention, I guess, that the only context in which we could have met is with me traveling, I suppose.
You and your partner, or me and you?
Yeah. me and my ex-partner.
Yeah, okay.
Who is an Indian lady from Delhi originally, but we met in Mumbai.
Yeah, so you met when we met in Mumbai.
Yeah, so you were present for a lot of that relationship. And unfortunately, I mean, at the time, of course, I fell head over heels, and there's nothing that anyone could say to me that would make me think that the relationship wouldn't work. But given the very specific circumstances in which that relationship came to be, when those things start to change, there's obviously adjustments you have to make. The relationship changes itself. I'm not going to stop traveling. And, you know, she's an amazing woman, has got her own things going on in her own life. She's, you know, she is a success in my opinion, and will be an even bigger success. But it's just very difficult when two people who are fairly sort of headstrong and have their own ideas of their future meet. Then, you know, you just got to make sure that you're doing what you want to do. And it was absolutely amazing while it lasted. And now, of course, I'm sort of dealing with the fallout of that. So,
yeah. And a lot of your trip post that breakup was sort of an attempt to figure out where your head was at, I think, right?
Yeah.
We parted ways after Oman and then both did different things. You had some soul searching to do. I suppose what would be interesting to talk about would be, I mean, I suppose both our perspectives is don't let travel get in the way of being an open person with the capacity to fall in love.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, you'd never say let your desire for constantly insatiable experience prevent you from connecting with someone.
Yeah. Because I think there is a certain level, or you know, there's an experience you can have with someone that maybe is only achievable if you spend a lot of time with them.
Yes.
So, yeah, in order to reach that sort of deeper level of connection and experience, it's important to, in my opinion, be physical with someone, you know, with them physically. And that doesn't involve always traveling for weeks on end or still trying to backpack or whatever. Then if it feels right, it feels right. And then maybe allow it to take whichever shape it does.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk to you about this because I'm someone who puts travel so much at the forefront of my life that it's sort of the one compromise that prevents most relationships from forming. And you'll know I've been in relationships this year that I've ended because I wanted, needed, desired to travel and that person didn't.
Yes. Yeah, I know that.
Now, that's a compromise. That's the one compromise I could never do in a relationship. I'm very happy to compromise on a lot of things, but wanting to go traveling for the time being and potentially forever is kind of my jam.
Yeah, it can be quite limiting in that sense, I suppose, because you're almost predicting the future or trying to control the future and not allowing any sort of deviation from that.
Yeah, you knew that travel with that person wasn't necessarily on the cards as a perpetual thing, but you pursued the relationship anyway because of love.
Yeah.
What sort of a message to travelers who are seeking relationships do you have? Do you think that was something that could have worked? Was needed to have a lot of compromise to work?
Well, yeah, I think you've probably hit the nail on the head. I think I felt, and this is me being quite honest, that I would have to make more compromises than she would, because her life, I don't think, would have changed that much. And I'm sure there is a world in which it would have worked. But because of what I want to do and what we're doing, I wasn't prepared to curb that at all for the sakes of the relationship. Because there were some cracks that started to show when I was abroad, when we were abroad or whatever. And I thought, I just thought, I wonder if this is sort of a little taste of what could happen in the future. And also, like I've just mentioned, being physically with someone, even we've experienced this very recently, that when we're together, it's so much easier to solve problems, right? And when you're distant, I mean, of course, it can always, it always has the potential to work if the commitment level is the same, or, you know, there's communication is obviously incredibly important. But I just had enough evidence that this could be very, very difficult, and it was heavily impacting my travel as well.
Yeah, I think that was like clear to see.
Yeah, so it's a tough one. I mean, I obviously would never discourage anyone from going into a relationship with someone if they fell in love, if they met the right person, if they happen to be traveling, whether that person's a traveler or not. I mean, you can always, I like to think you can always make it work. But there's a million reasons why a relationship won't work or fails or what have you. So yeah, I mean, it was an amazing, amazing experience. She's an amazing woman who I'd still talk to now, actually, very regularly.
Yeah.
But I think the thing we should talk about really is the way in which I tried to deal with it was quite drastic, and it probably would seem like I was running away.
Yeah, because there's kind of two camps of people, I think. There's people who go traveling, meet someone, and then stop traveling to be with that person. And there's the people that unrelentingly travel regardless, and that can affect their relationships negatively. But after what happened, yeah, you dealt with it by doing what you do best, which is travel.
Yeah, I would have to change the way I've lived for the last 10 years, I think. And it's easy to say on paper, isn't it? Oh, if we did that, it would work, or maybe we can work on that, or if we try and work towards a time when we are physically together. It's easy enough to say that, but I think logistically, practically, the reality of that situation is a relationship that would have been very, very difficult for me.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, have you been in a relationship? Well, I know you've been in a relationship for a fact that's been very, very long distance for a very long time, and it's been successful for a long time as well.
Yeah, so I was with someone, we kind of got together during the pandemic and then stayed together when I went to Canada. And when I met you and the farm, I was in a long distance relationship with someone who was, my best friend, as well as being someone I loved. And that relationship ultimately didn't work out because it stopped being a long distance relationship where we had plans to meet in the near future, and those plans kept on constantly getting pushed back to the point where it was like, oh, maybe I'll be able to see you for a month in 6 months time. Then there'll be 6 months again, and then we'll see each other. It just became such a long expanse that I was still very much in love with that person and still wanted to be in their life very badly, but it started being, we were just waiting for this nebula time that didn't really ever materialize. And they wanted, in fairness to them, to build a kind of a nest, a place to be. And that's not what gets me going.
Yeah, it's almost the opposite, if there can be an opposite to the sort of things that we do. The other thing that's really worth mentioning, I think, is that my relationship with the one that I've just come out of, the worrying thing for me is that it wasn't just a loss of the person in my life in that capacity. I also started to ask myself, does she represent a girlfriend?
Yeah.
And does this now mean that a relationship is off the cards if I'm going to achieve everything I want to in life? And those are the questions that I was asking myself when I was on the bike, because it's one thing to live in the same place as someone, maybe even be from that location. Let's use where we grew up in the UK. If you're in a relationship with someone that you sort of knows from a similar area, and then you happen to break up with them after a year or 6 years or whatever it might be, you've already got a well-established life and sort of a predictable life, because you've got your routines, you go to work, you do whatever. Whereas I came out of a relationship that I was kind of, very intense very early on, as it would have been.
Yeah.
And then I chose to do something extraordinary, like cycle a bike around Taiwan for 3 weeks. So you cannot escape your own thoughts.
And it's important to touch on that intensity, because when you meet someone traveling that you think might be your person, might be someone you have the potential to fall in love with, it's kind of either intense early on or it's not anything.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, I'm in Mumbai for 1 more month. Either we love each other or I'll see you never.
Yeah.
So, and I've experienced that as well. You have to figure out whether this person's worth holding on to or not far sooner than you would if you had a date once a week down the pub in Milton Keynes.
Yeah, it's almost like an incredibly concentrated, 6 month or one year relationship. It's sort of condensed down into a few weeks of seeing each other all the time, and it's obviously a clash of cultures as well.
Yeah.
So there's a few sort of nuances and adjustments I had to make for sure, which was, it's all learning, and I loved it. But you are right, it was so intense because you're having your own experience as a backpacker, as a traveller, as a tourist of Mumbai. And, that's a very different experience in and of itself. And then on top of that, you've got a relationship as well, which is very exciting, should always be exciting, but then it's incredibly intense because, I'm not going to be there forever. And there's pressures of sort of visas and other plans and what have you. So, yeah, it was a crazy time, man.
It was a crazy time.
It really was.
We know that, it goes without saying, all relationships give us a gift, and we never, we were always happy to have had them. Better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Do you think that all going ahead, the way it happened, the way it broke up, all that stuff, do you think that going off and cycling gave you enough additional perspective that it was like, yeah, that was the way to deal with it, and it's had a positive impact on you overall, even if you're still, sad and obviously grieving a relationship?
Yeah, definitely. I can say that almost without doubt, really, because, like I said, you can't escape your own thoughts. And when you've thought something again and again and again, and then analysed it from a load of different angles and questioned whether you were a good person and whether there was actually a world in which that could have worked, did you do enough? Did you give it enough time? All this sort of stuff. You ask yourself so many questions in such a short space of time that you're able to deal with what is a hell of a lot and a huge amount of sort of emotions and stress and what have you in maybe, I don't know about whether a shorter time is really the right way to say it, but maybe sort of a more in-depth analysis of your own feelings than I would have been able to if I was still going about my normal life, let's say, quote unquote, normal life, and had other distractions.
Yeah, it's difficult when traveling to not just let the brilliance of the experience mask all other emotions. People accuse us often of like, oh, you were running away from responsibility and all that stuff. And yeah, you know what? For a lot of people, and for me as well, when I first started, traveling is a running away. It's overloading your mind with so many experiences that you don't have to deal with what's going on a deeper level. But if you are running away from something whilst traveling, it doesn't last very long. I mean, I was running away from dealing with my personal issues that I had with, feeling worthwhile as a human being, all that stuff. But you quickly realize that whenever you get off the plane, you're the first person that's there always. You always beat yourself to a destination. So there's a difference between running away from a problem by traveling and then traveling in order to get some space to deal with the problem and have some perspective. And I think that's what you were doing when you were cycling around Taiwan.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. It's incredibly isolating cycling a bike on your own for, however many hours each day.
Totally.
And I think that is, I was actively trying to deal with it.
Yes.
I wasn't just trying to do something to distract myself and to get out of that space or whatever. I knew I needed to create some distance. I knew I needed time to think on my own. I don't even think we spoke about it that much, did we?
Well, that's it. Yeah, we spoke about that. We spoke about stuff a lot as we were together. But then when you went off and did the cycling trip, we rarely spoke at all. It was kind of like holistic distance from everyone that you had. And I think that was obviously very worthwhile for you. It led to some important realizations.
Yeah, I mean, it might not be the way that everyone copes best, or it might not even be the answer to many other people's problems. But at the very least, I cycled around Taiwan.
Yeah, there is always that. I hope that's a value to people. I hope that, it's a very different type of tripology, but I think it's almost like one of the serendipitous things. I'm glad the audio cut off because I think that's like an important thing to share and hopefully it helps someone. I think that we often get messages that say, I've quit my job, ended my relationship, and I'm ready to go traveling. You guys have inspired me. Whee! And I think that's cool. That relationship, hopefully it would have ended anyway, regardless of whether you wanted to travel or not, because I think that some of the coolest travel scenarios I've seen are when two people love traveling and they go off together. And I think that as we travel more and more, we get to share our travel experiences with each other and with you guys. I think having someone traveling with you that you can share experiences with sounds pretty cool.
Well, I think that the podcast, of course, is very personal.
Yeah.
And travel is very personal as well. So I'm very glad I got the opportunity to share that. And if, if you are in a relationship or you're coming out of a relationship and you want to talk about it, you shoot us a message, because we're open to having these much sort of deeper. We do enjoy having these deeper discussions because, travel has to be everything, doesn't it? When you do bet the farm on traveling the world for any length of time, certainly the way that we do, you can't pick and choose the good from the bad, and you just have to take everything for what it is. So
if that's resonated with you, like at Tripology Podcast on social media, or head to our website, there's a contact form there. Reach out to us, because we're the Tripology community is an opportunity to ask me and Adam questions and talk about stuff like that and share stories with us. Some people send us messages with some personal stories, and we reply to all of those. If you send us a message to the Hostel Common Room on tripologypodcast.com, we will reply to that message. We love it. You don't have to be on Patreon for that. That's just something that we like to do to interact with you guys. So, yeah. That was this episode of Tripology. Like I said, if you want to hear the madcap original episode where we're dropping Korean barbecue bombs in our mouth and thinking about the government, you go to patreon.com/Tripology podcast. But it was a little bit of a swap. This is the kind of content that sometimes we do on the Patreon side.
Yeah. Well, I guess now we get the afternoon off because we've already recorded the Patreon section.
It's inception of ideas here on Tripology podcast. Oh my goodness, on the next week, if I aren't going to pack my bags to Brazil. So we'll still be here, but I'm going to show you a little bit of how I get prepared for a long adventure.
All right. Well, I look forward to that. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
We'll see you there.
Bye.